Imagine discovering the missing link between apes and humans, fossils dating back 750,000 years that could rewrite our understanding of human evolution. Now imagine those priceless fossils disappearing without a trace during World War II, sparking an 80-year mystery that involves U.S. Marines, Japanese soldiers, the FBI, the CIA, psychics with dowsing rods, con artists demanding ransoms, and possibly a parking lot in China. This is the story of Peking Man, the most important collection of human ancestor fossils ever discovered, and their complete disappearance on December 4th, 1941. Just 3 days before Pearl Harbor. The fossils represented at least 40 different individuals and included nearly complete skulls, jaws, and over 150 teeth from Homo erectus pekinensis, an extinct human ancestor who lived in China between 400,000 and 750,000 years ago. They were instrumental in proving that early humans evolved in Asia and fundamentally shaped our understanding of human evolution. On December 4th, 1941, the fossils were packed into 2 wooden footlockers and handed over to U.S. Marines for evacuation to America, where they would be safe from the Japanese invasion. The fossils left the Peking Union Medical College in Beijing, headed for a ship waiting at the port of Qinhuangdao. They never arrived. For 8 decades, scientists, treasure hunters, governments, and amateur sleuths have searched desperately for these irreplaceable fossils. Theories range from them being on board a sunken Japanese ship, to being buried under a parking lot, to being ground up for traditional Chinese medicine, to sitting forgotten in a Japanese museum. Today we're diving deep into one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries, the vanishing act of Peking Man. To understand why these fossils matter so much, we need to go back to the 1920s in a cave site called Zhoukoudian, located about 30 miles southwest of Beijing. For centuries, Chinese locals had known the area as Dragon Bone Hill, because ancient bones constantly jutted out of the ground. These dragon bones were collected and ground into powder for traditional Chinese medicine, a practice that had unknowingly destroyed countless fossils over the centuries. In 1918, a Swedish geologist named Johan Gunnar Andersson visited the site and immediately recognized its potential. He began excavations with Austrian paleontologist Otto Zdansky. In 1921, they discovered 2 human-like teeth. The teeth were intriguing, but not conclusive. Enter Canadian anatomist Davidson Black. When he examined the teeth in 1927, he became convinced they represented a previously unknown species of early human. Based on a single molar, Black boldly declared the discovery of Sinanthropus pekinensis, Peking Man from China. Black needed funding to continue excavations. He approached the Rockefeller Foundation, which agreed to establish the Cenozoic Research Laboratory with significant financial backing. It was a gamble. Black was making extraordinary claims based on minimal evidence. Then came December in 1729, the discovery that changed everything. Chinese paleontologist Pei Wenzhong was working deep in the caves when he discovered the first nearly complete skullcap of Peking Man. He was clinging to a rope dangling in front of a rock face when he saw it embedded in the stone. When he carefully extracted it and brought it to the surface, the team knew they had found something extraordinary. This was no isolated tooth. This was a complete skull from a human ancestor who had lived hundreds of thousands of years ago. Over the next decade, excavations at Zhoukoudian yielded an astounding treasure trove. By 1937, researchers had recovered fossils from at least 40 different individuals, men, women, and children. The collection included 4 nearly complete skulls, over 150 teeth, multiple jaw fragments, and other skeletal remains. But the fossils weren't the only discoveries. The cave also contained over 100,000 stone tools, axes, hammers, scrapers, and clear evidence that these ancient humans had used controlled fire. They lived in communities, they hunted, they cooked their food. They had sophisticated tool-making abilities. Peking Man proved that Homo erectus had inhabited Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. The discovery fundamentally challenged the prevailing theory that humans had evolved exclusively in Africa or Europe. It opened up entirely new questions about human migration, adaptation, and evolution. Peking Man became an international sensation. Scientists from around the world came to study the fossils. Papers were published. Debates raged. The fossils were photographed, measured, x-rayed, and meticulously documented. Franz Weidenreich, a German anatomist who took over research after Davidson Black's sudden death in 1934, worked tirelessly to document every detail. He created plaster casts, detailed drawings, photographs, and comprehensive measurements of every fossil. His monographs describing the fossils would later prove crucial. They were all that remained after the originals disappeared. But by 1937, time was running out. On July 7, 1937, the Marco Polo Bridge incident ignited the Second Sino-Japanese War. Japanese forces launched a full-scale invasion of China, committing horrific atrocities as they swept across the country. Excavations at Zhoukoudian ground to a halt. The scientists knew the Japanese coveted the Peking man fossils. Imperial powers have always looted the cultural treasures of conquered peoples. Look at how Europeans ransacked Egypt and Greece. The Japanese would almost certainly seize the fossils if given the chance. Franz Weidenreich tried to convince Henry S. Houghton, the head of the Peking Union Medical College where the fossils were stored, to authorize their transfer to the United States for safekeeping. Houghton refused. The fossils belonged to China, he argued, and should remain in China. As a compromise, Weidenreich had the fossils moved from his lab to a vault in an American bank. But even that didn't feel safe enough, so they were soon returned to the college and locked in a safe in Weidenreich's office. Weidenreich continued his documentation work with increasing urgency. He knew that if anything happened to the fossils, at least the casts, photographs, and detailed measurements would survive. In 1941, with funding from the Rockefeller Foundation, Weidenreich left China for the American Museum of Natural History in New York. He took all his casts, research notes, drawings, and photographs with him. The original fossils remained in Beijing. By September 1941, the situation had become critical. The Rockefeller Foundation and Chinese scientist Wen Zhongpei finally convinced the U.S. Embassy to authorize the fossils' evacuation. A plan was developed. The U.S. Marine Corps would transport the fossils from Beijing to the port of Qinhuangdao, where they would be loaded onto the SS President Harrison and shipped to the American Museum of Natural History. It seemed like a solid plan. The Marines were experienced. The route was relatively secure. The ship was scheduled and ready. On December 4th, 1941, anthropologist Hu Zhengji and his colleagues carefully wrapped each fossil in tissue paper and cotton, then packed them into 2 large wooden footlockers. The footlockers were sealed and handed over to the U.S. Marines stationed at the Peking Union Medical College. The fossils left the building and were never seen again. What happened next is where history dissolves into confusion, contradiction, and mystery. The fossils were supposedly transported by U.S. Marines from the Peking Union Medical College to the SS President Harrison, which was to dock at Qinhuangdao port near the Marine base Camp Holcomb. The plan was for the Marines to take the footlockers by train from Beijing to Camp Holcomb in Qinhuangdao, approximately 180 miles away. From there, they would be loaded onto the SS President Harrison, which was scheduled to arrive on Monday, December 8th, 1941. But December 8th, 1941 in Asia was December 7th, 1941 in Hawaii, Pearl Harbor Day. Before the President Harrison could reach China, Japanese ships attacked her. She ran aground. The ship never made it to Qinhuangdao. The Marines at Camp Holcomb were suddenly trapped, cut off with a world war exploding around them. On December 8th, 1941, the same day as Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces invaded Camp Holcomb. The Marines were captured and became prisoners of war. Their belongings were ransacked. Camp Holcomb fell to the Japanese, and somewhere in that chaos, the footlockers containing Peking man disappeared. It is not known whether they were stolen, lost, or destroyed by Japanese soldiers. Here's what we know for certain. The fossils left the Peking Union Medical College on December 4th, 1941. They were in the custody of U.S. Marines. They were supposed to reach Camp Holcomb and then board the SS President Harrison. The ship was attacked before arriving. Camp Holcomb was overrun by Japanese forces on December 8th. The fossils have never been recovered. Here's what we don't know. Did the fossils actually reach Camp Holcomb? Were they still with the Marines when the Japanese attacked? Did Japanese soldiers find them? Were they buried by Marines trying to protect them? Were they destroyed, stolen, or simply lost in the chaos? The mystery deepens because the Japanese were definitely looking for them. When Japanese forces occupied the Peking Union Medical College, they cracked open the safe where the fossils had been stored. They were furious to find it empty. They arrested an American lab associate named Trevor Bowen and interrogated him for 5 days, demanding to know where the fossils were. Bowen didn't know. No one knew. After World War II ended in 1945, the search for Peking man began immediately. Weidenreich and others attempted to locate the fossils after World War II, but to no avail. The U.S. military conducted investigations. The FBI got involved. So did the CIA. Chinese, Japanese, and American governments all launched inquiries. Private citizens offered rewards. Scientists became obsessed with finding them. But every lead ended in disappointment. Theory 1. The Japanese took them. The most popular early theory was that Japanese soldiers intercepted the footlockers, either on the train from Beijing or at Camp Holcomb, and brought them to Japan. This made logical sense. The Japanese coveted the fossils and had the means and opportunity to seize them. After Japan's surrender, American occupation forces searched museums, universities, and storage facilities throughout Japan. They found nothing. If the Japanese military had taken the fossils, they left no trace. Theory 2. They were destroyed. Perhaps the most tragic theory is that the fossils were destroyed, either deliberately or accidentally. Someone who didn't recognize their value might have tossed the footlockers aside as worthless old bones. They could have been burned, buried with garbage, or simply discarded during the chaos of war. Rumors about the fate of the fossils range from being on board a sunken ship, such as the Japanese Awa Maru, to being ground up for traditional Chinese medicine. The Awa Maru was a Japanese passenger cargo ship sunk by an American submarine in 1945. Rumors persisted for years that the fossils were aboard, but extensive searches of the wreck found no evidence. Theory 3. They're somewhere in China. Some believe the fossils never left China at all. Perhaps Chinese officials secretly decided to keep them rather than send them to America. Perhaps they were hidden during the war and the hiding place was lost. Perhaps they're buried somewhere in Beijing, waiting to be rediscovered. Theory 4. The Marines buried them. As Camp Holcomb came under attack, Marines might have buried the footlockers to protect them from Japanese looters, intending to retrieve them later, but war, imprisonment, and chaos prevented anyone from returning. This theory gained credibility in 2010, thanks to a stunning revelation. After decades of nothing but dead ends, the case caught a break in 2010, when the son of a former U.S. Marine emailed paleontologists at the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa. Paul Bowen emailed paleoanthropologist Lee Berger with an extraordinary story. His father, Richard Bowen, had been a Marine corporal stationed at Camp Holcomb, not in 1941 when the fossils disappeared, but in 1947 during China's civil war between nationalists and communists. In 1947, communist forces surrounded Camp Holcomb. One night, they lit thousands of campfires on the surrounding hillsides as a show of force. Richard Bowen said it looked like the world's biggest Christmas tree, and he was terrified. The Marines were facing annihilation from a vastly superior force. While digging foxholes in preparation for the attack, Richard Bowen's shovel collided with a chest of bones. He opened it briefly, saw old bones, assumed it was a coffin or grave, and quickly reburied it. He was focused on survival, not archaeology. Shortly after, the Marines successfully evacuated Camp Holcomb in a dramatic rescue operation. Bowen survived the war, but didn't think about the bones again for decades, until he saw a television program about Peking man in the 1980s. The program mentioned that the fossils had been brought to Qinhuangdao by Marines and were last seen at Camp Holcomb. Bowen realized the box of bones he'd found might have been Peking man. When Paul Bowen emailed Lee Berger in 2010, Berger was stunned but skeptical. Could this story possibly be true? He consulted military records. Bowen's service at Camp Holcomb checked out. His descriptions of the base layout matched historical documents. The timeline made sense. A few months after receiving the email, the scientists traveled to the port city of Qinhuangdao with their fingers crossed. Working with Chinese colleagues Wu Liu and Xu Jiewu, Berger traveled to Qinhuangdao in November 2010. Using Bowen's descriptions and help from a local historian, they located the former site of Camp Holcomb. They arrived at the former location of Camp Holcomb to find an industrial area of warehouses and a parking lot where the footlocker was reportedly buried. The area had been completely transformed. Where Camp Holcomb once stood was now a bustling industrial district with warehouses, roads, and a large parking lot. Based on Bowen's description and military maps, the team identified 3 possible locations where he might have dug the foxhole. All 3 were within a 200-meter by 200-meter area. One possible location was underneath a large warehouse. The other 2 were under the parking lot. The scientists could do nothing to retrieve the trove of fossils. They couldn't just dig up an active industrial area. The parking lot and warehouses were in use. There was no way to conduct an excavation without massive disruption and enormous expense. But there was hope. Supposedly, the area is slated for redevelopment in the near future, which might allow for an excavation of the site. Local authorities committed to monitoring any future excavations in the area. If redevelopment occurs and construction crews dig deep enough, there's a chance, slim but real, that the footlockers might be uncovered. The Bowen lead was the most credible in decades, but it wasn't the only one. In 2005, the Chinese government announced it was launching an all-out search to find the Peking man bones and asked the governments in Japan, South Korea, and the United States for help. A special committee was established by the Fangshan district government of southwestern Beijing. They compiled a comprehensive inventory of exactly what was lost. Hundreds of teeth, 4 skulls of Peking man, skulls and bones of upper caveman, and other fossils, all packed into 7 boxes inside 2 large crates. As of 2006, nearly 100 leads from emails, phone calls, and letters have been checked out by Chinese investigators. A contract worker who worked at a U.S. military base in Tianjin claims he saw Americans stash the bones in a secret basement compartment before they fled China. But most leads have been hoaxes, scams, or honest mistakes. One of the most bizarre incidents occurred in the 1970s. A woman met a Chicago businessman who was offering a reward for information on the bones at top of the Empire State Building, showed him some picture which she said were of a box with the missing fossils, and then disappeared and was never heard from again. Most think she was part of a hoax. So the FBI and the CIA got involved with checking leads, sifting through scammers who claimed to have the fossils and asked for million-dollar ransoms. One scientist, in his desperation, even relied on the expertise of a professional psychic who had previously used a dowsing rod to find Bigfoot in Maine. Needless to say, the psychic didn't find Peking man either. You might wonder, why does the loss of these fossils matter so much? After all, Franz Weidenreich created detailed casts, photographs, measurements, and drawings before they disappeared. According to Teilhard, the synanthrope has been dated, described, measured, x-rayed, drawn, photographed, and cast in plaster down to the last fossa, crista, and tubercle. The loss is more a matter of sentiment than a true tragedy for science. But this view isn't shared by everyone. No chemical tests or research were ever done on the bones before they mysteriously disappeared at the beginning of World War II. Or modern scientific techniques, DNA analysis, isotope dating, chemical composition analysis, microscopic examination could reveal information Weidenreich never dreamed of. We could learn about Peking man's diet, diseases, genetic relationships to other human populations, exact age, and migration patterns. The loss of the originals means we can never apply these modern techniques. Questions that could be answered remained forever unanswered. Moreover, the fossils represented the most complete collection of Homo erectus remains ever found. Casts and photographs are valuable, but they can't capture every detail. Subtle features, microscopic marks, internal structures, all of this information is locked in the original fossils, if they still exist. And there's the emotional and cultural significance. For China, Peking man was proof that Chinese civilization had roots reaching back hundreds of thousands of years. The fossils were a source of national pride and scientific identity. Their loss was, and remains, deeply felt. Excavations at Zhoukoudian, resumed after the Chinese Civil War, ended in 1949, and scientists have uncovered numerous additional fossils and stone tools since then. 4 of the teeth from the original excavation period are still in the possession of the Paleontological Museum of Uppsala University. But the main collection from 1921-1937, the skulls, the jaws, the hundreds of specimens, remains missing. So where is Peking man today, nearly 84 years after disappearing? Though there have been many attempts to locate the footlockers, including by offers of large cash rewards, it is unknown what happened to them after they left the college on 4 December 1941. The most credible theory remains Richard Bowen's account. If he's correct, the fossils are buried under a parking lot or warehouse in Qinhuangdao, China, protected by layers of concrete and asphalt, waiting for a redevelopment project that may or may not ever happen. But it's also possible they were destroyed in 1941, ground up for medicine, thrown away as garbage, or sunk to the bottom of the ocean. We may never know. What we do know is that Peking man changed our understanding of human evolution. The discovery proved that Homo erectus lived in Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. It opened up new questions about human migration and adaptation. It fundamentally reshaped paleoanthropology, and thanks to Franz Weidenreich's meticulous documentation, the scientific value of the discovery survived even though the fossils themselves vanished. Perhaps one day a construction crew in Qinhuangdao will dig deep enough to strike a wooden footlocker. Perhaps inside, miraculously preserved despite decades underground, will be the skulls, jaws, and teeth of our ancestors who lived 750,000 years ago. Or perhaps Peking man's disappearance will remain one of archaeology's greatest unsolved mysteries, a reminder of how easily history can be lost and how much we still have left to discover. Thank you for watching. If you found this deep dive into the mystery of Peking man fascinating, please subscribe for more World War II mysteries. And let me know in the comments, do you think the fossils are really under that parking lot? Or were they destroyed decades ago? What's your theory? Until next time, remember, sometimes the most important discoveries aren't the ones we make, but the ones we lose and keep searching for.